I'm Angela Kelly Robeck, host of the Empowered Principal Podcast, a part of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you're listening to now. Shows on the network are individually owned, and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
Teaching While Queer is a podcast for 2S LGBTQ+ educational professionals to share their experiences in academia. Hi, I'm your host, Bryan Stanton, a theater pedagogue and educator in New York City, and my goal is to share stories from around the world from 2S LGBTQ+ educators. I hope you enjoy Teaching While Queer. Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Teaching While Queer. I am your host, Bryan Stanton, and today I'm so excited. I have Jacob Boergesson with me. Did I say your name correctly?
Boergesson, yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Where are you joining us from, Jacob?
Hi there, everyone. So I am joining you from Wallingford, Connecticut.
Wallingford? I have no idea where that's at.
So I always tell people that it's in the New Haven area because more people tend to know where that is.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. And you are leaving education, but what did you teach and how long were you teaching?
So I was a teacher for the last 9 years. I was certified in music, pre-K through 12th grade. So I worked at 4 different schools throughout my career. I taught every single grade level possible. Most recently, the job that I just left, I was the middle school choir general music teacher for the last 5 years, where I taught grades 6 through 8. In addition to teaching there, I ran the drama club and I ran an audition select choir group as well.
It's a lot. Those of us who teach electives, we get all that like after school responsibility. It's super fun.
Absolutely. And they're like, oh, but you get a stipend, which is like probably 10 cents an hour by the time you do the math, right?
Yeah, you never do the math. It makes you feel bad. Just don't do the math, folks.
No, everybody told me to do it, and I said, I really don't want to, because then I'm just going to be really sad.
Yeah, real upset. I feel that right there, very deep. So let's take a journey back in time. Can you tell me a little bit what it was like for you as a queer student?
Sure. So growing up, I will be honest, it's like I didn't run to, which was fortunate, I didn't run into as many issues as some others did. I grew up in a really small town. To give you perspective, my class was the biggest graduating class ever, and there was only 94 of us.
Oh, wow.
So it was, so very, very, very small. And so pretty much everybody within our grade, it's like there were cliques, quote unquote, but it was like, everybody kind of all got along with each other because it was such a small, tight-knit group, and everybody was kind of friendly with each other. As far as like, I wasn't out. I wasn't out until like the tail end of my senior year of high school. And, I would occasionally get, comments here and there. It's like, oh, Jake Boergesson's gay, Jake Boergesson's queer, blah, 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 blah. But fortunately, it's like I had a good friend base that would stand up for me, and it was never to a point where I was like dreading going to school and dreading, interacting with anybody. I would say I still had a very positive experience. I think a lot of people had guessed that I was going to come out at some point. We did have a GSA, Gay Straight Alliance, when I was in high school. And by my senior year, I was the president. So.
Me too. I was the founding president of ours.
Oh, were you? That's awesome.
And so, how do you feel like, in some aspects, like it's very lucky that you got to be in a place where you didn't deal with as much animosity as most, and I feel also that kind of like privilege. Like I got the occasional comments, but nothing like too extreme. How do you feel that your upbringing has helped you when it comes to being a queer teacher on campus and kind of representing a community?
Sure. Yeah. So I think that my whole upbringing definitely helped a lot, because I really, for the longest time, like I wasn't ever really afraid to be my authentic self for the most part. Obviously, when I came out to my family, I was obviously nervous because you never quite know how parents might respond to that. Even though I knew both of my parents were very liberal and very understanding and very accepting, it's still, it's hard when it's your own child sometimes to hear that. And I know for me, like my mom, when I came out, she was really upset. Wasn't upset that I was gay when I told her that I was gay, but more so just upset because she, started thinking about some of the things that I might have to endure, and I think that was what was hardest for her. But I think what was really nice about that was because I sort of had that support system feeding my way into college. Like when I went to college, I was like, yeah, all bets are off. Like gay. Like, I'm not hiding anything. Here I am. And then, once I started teaching, I think I had been so out at that point for such a long time. It wasn't really even second nature. Kids would ask me like, oh, Mr. B, are you gay? I'd be like, yeah. So I was, like I said, it's like, I didn't really have anywhere where I was teaching where I felt like I had to hide that.
That's awesome.
Which I think helped. Yeah.
Do you think that has an impact on the students that you work with, that they get to see you be authentic out there in the classroom?
Oh, 100%. Because I think that when kids go to school, I think the biggest thing that they need to see is they need to see someone who might emulate them in some way. Whether that's, their interests, their sexual orientation, their race, their gender identity. I think it's really important for kids to see that when they go into any kind of school. And I think that sometimes schools can sometimes struggle with that because there can be kids there where they come in and they're saying, I don't think that there's anybody here like me or who looks like me or who understands me, And so I think that, being my most authentic self, I don't know, I think it just automatically helps with the whole rapport that you have with your students. Because when I was a teacher, that was the most important thing to me. It's like I remember one of my old superintendents saying, he's like, listen, it's like if I had a teacher with like, who taught really well and like, test scores up the wazoo and the kids were going to Harvard and this and stuff like that, but he had no rapport with his students. He was like, I would take the teacher any day, the one that actually builds relationships with their students and creates that, climate in their classroom over the test scores and stuff.
I was talking with a friend of mine last night, and he is an orchestra teacher. And he was telling me about one of his mentors when he was going to grad school, who has an article out that basically did some research where like music teachers who have like gay voice or queer voice are rated as better teachers. And then
interesting.
They get like a better performance quality, they get better engagement from their students. But then those who had like heterosexual voice is the way the terminology he was using. So it was like gay voice and heterosexual voice were considered stronger leaders. And
interesting.
So I find that so interesting because I think there are a lot of us in the queer community who are teachers who get to that rapport really quickly. And I think that falls into like weird, like maybe students or whomever, on this study or whatnot, perceive it as like not necessarily strong leadership skills, but like honestly, if you don't have rapport with people, you're not going to get the end results that you want.
No, and that trickles down to just not just teacher to student, but like admin to teachers. If admin doesn't have good rapport with the teachers, then it's not it's not a positive environment for everybody. And kids can also sense that. Kids can sense when there's tension between teachers and administrators or teachers and other teachers. They really pick up on that stuff, and they know. Like I've had students say to me, they're like, oh, Mr. B, like she doesn't get along with her, does she? And I'm just like, I don't know what you mean. Yeah. But it's true. They pick up on that stuff so much.
Perceptive.
Exactly.
So I followed you for years, and so I have like a side question. Do you ever use your cosplay to help build rapport with your students? Because you are an avid cosplayer.
Yeah. So what's interesting is that, so I've used it for a couple different things within the classroom. So up until, and I don't know how it took me until this last school year for me to actually get like Marvel posters in my classroom. I just kind of kept putting it off. Actually, no, I remember what happened now. It's like I had them ordered from Amazon and something happened and then they got lost and then I got sad. And then so I didn't order them because I was in a bad mood. I was like, oh, F Amazon. I'm just like annoyed. And then so this year I finally got them, which the kids picked up on because they're like, that's pretty on brand for you. But what was interesting is that it did definitely help build rapport with a lot of my kids, because once they know that, once they knew that I was a big old nerd, it's like they felt like they would be allowed to express that and stuff like that. Like I loved talking to my kids about Stranger Things and, the MCU and Star Wars and stuff like that whenever new shows came out. It's just, you don't even have to be too, obvious about it. But even if like something example, it's like a kid walks in with a Stranger Things shirt and it's the first day of school. And I say to myself, I'm like, all right, they might be a little quiet. I was like, I'm going to let them, get used to me. But then at some point I can kind of go over there and be like, oh, you like Stranger Things? It's like, I love Stranger Things, and it's funny. It's like some of the kids are all about my TikTok and stuff like that. And they think it's great and stuff like that. And some of them, it's like, I catch them making fun of me because, they're like, oh, he's in his 30s. He does cosplay, whatever. But, hey, I always tell them, I'm like, well, I could really care less what a 12-year-old thinks about me at this point, at this point in my life. But it has been good for that. And it actually helped the last 2 years with raising funds for the toy donations that we did, because we always did. So we have Connecticut Children's Medical Center, which is the primary purpose of our toy drive. And then my district also does a program called the Holiday Bear, where the social worker and the psychologist, they work and kind of figure out which students we might have that might be in need of help, for gifts and things during the holidays and stuff like that. And so I randomly thought of it on a whim back in 2021, where like I posted a picture of myself in Captain America, like with a Santa hat under my Christmas tree, just like holding the presents. And I was like, hey, like, if anybody wants to donate, like, I'm going to go, donate, go shopping for presents, here's my Venmo and stuff like that. And then I got $400 and I couldn't believe how generous people were. And then this year I, did it again. And I brought a couple of my cosplay friends with me, which was really funny because so this year we went as Kristoff, Anna, and Elsa from Frozen, and so we went to one of the malls up in Massachusetts, and there were so many people waiting in line to meet Santa. But I'll never forget, there was this girl that like saw the girls and was like, "Mom, I don't want to meet Santa. I want to meet Elsa." And we ended up taking as many pictures as Santa did. And it was actually it was cool for my friend Sam, because her, who was dressed as Elsa, she runs a princess party business. So she was able to be like, oh, well, here's my card if you ever want parties and stuff like that. But I would say overall, yeah, the whole cosplay thing definitely helped a lot in the long run, not just for like, the fundraising, like I said before, but just again, building more rapport about, nerd stuff.
Yeah, it's funny because I say, and I've told this to my students, that like I personally, as a theater teacher, believe that teachers are the best actors on the planet, because you as a student only get to learn what the teacher wants you to learn about them. And so I think that when you have those moments where you get to like geek out with your students, that it just automatically creates a bond. And so, and then that bond is harder to break than if it was something superficial.
Oh yeah, 100%. And the big thing that was, so I don't know if you ever watched that show when it was on, but it's like, if you're familiar with Dance Moms. So Dance Moms had like a COVID renaissance, where all of a sudden now, like, all of the kids like my age are watching it show. And the amount of like quotes back and forth with Dance Mom quotes that like my girls and I would do during like drama club, it was insane. It got to the point where they would be like, they'd be like, can we watch Dance Moms in chorus? I'm like, no, we can't watch Dance Moms in chorus, class girls. Come on.
Not today.
But
we'll wait for finals.
Not today. I think we did. Now that I look back on it, I think we actually did, like the very last week of school when everything was said and done. I said, all right, fine. We're putting it. we put like a best of like moments on and stuff like that, and we just all laughed and had a good time.
I think that last year during finals, both for
Mhm.
the fall semester and the spring semester, at some point or another, we were just playing Smash Bros on my projector. So
Oh,
that's
nice.
kind of how things end up when you're an elective teacher at the end of the year, going like, I don't have anything to test you on. Here's a project.
No, absolutely. Or I'm like, well, you already did your chorus concert.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't know what you really want. And then those last days of the year just get so crazy anyway, because it's like, oh, well, today's a half day and today's not a half day. And this grade's on a field trip and this grade's not. It's like we got to a point, the specials teachers, where the PE teacher was just like, bring them all to the gym. If they want to play, they can. If they don't, maybe we'll figure out something. Like there was one day he had like dodgeball going on in there, and I brought some kids. I was like, hey, if anybody wants to do karaoke, we're going in the auditorium, just if you think about it, by that time in the school year, it's like they're not going to learn anything new. Their brains are fried. The school year is way too long as it is.
Absolutely. So you have made a decision this year to leave education. Do you mind talking a little bit about why you made that?
Sure. So what was interesting was when I decided to leave, it came as a bit of a shock to not so much my closest friends, and my fiance, because, they had known for a long time that I wasn't really happy.
Hold the phone. Newly engaged fiance.
Oh, yes. Yes. Newly engaged. Yes. Yay.
Congratulations.
Yeah. So thank you. Yeah. So we, so I really knew for a long time. It was interesting because I had honestly thought about leaving after the 2020 school year, but March of 2020, we all got sent home, and I kind of just decided to stick it out because I was getting my master's at the time, and I somehow finagled a way to do my master's full time for 2 years while teaching full time. Don't really recommend it because I was very busy those 2 years. But hey, if you can swing it, go for it.
I'm currently in that boat working on my MFA,
Yeah.
so I totally get that.
There you go. Yeah, and that was me. I was getting my master's of music for opera, so I was just like, but so it had really been on my mind for a long time, and I think finally this school year. I don't know if it was necessarily anything about this particular school year that sent me over the edge where something really awful happened. And I said, absolutely not. I can't do this anymore. I think just I was getting towards the end of the school year. For me, I mean, and I know you do, theater also, so for me, it's like our big musical is in March, and that eats up my life December through when the show is over. So once that was done, I said to myself after like a week or so, I was like, yeah, it's time. I just knew that it was time for me to finally make the plunge. And what I said was, I had thought about it the year before too. And I started kind of applying to jobs back last summer, but hadn't officially resigned. And, I said to myself, I was like, if I don't just resign and do it, then I'm always going to drag my feet on finding another job. Whereas with this, I said, I was like, I'm going to resign. And that's going to kind of light the fire under my, ass to actually find a job, And so, I, after spring break in April, I went to my principal's office. I explained to her what was going on. At first she was a little surprised, because she kind of didn't really see it coming, as did a lot of my coworkers. But she was also very understanding and really supportive. And, she even admitted how hard, it's gotten, and she's relatively close to retirement. And she even said that she was like, I wasn't really counting my years until the last couple of years. She was like, but I'm definitely counting my years now. So, yeah, so I guess if I could say, if there were any specific reasons for it, I mean, I could probably roll out a red carpet and pull out a big list and stuff like that. But I think that the biggest thing that really was upsetting to me is that there's so much changing within a lot of the education system that's not benefiting the students. And we're here for the students, And I don't know, when decisions are made where it doesn't directly benefit the students, I'm just a little confused as to why those decisions are being made, and they're happening more and more and more. I don't know if, if I could give one example, like the biggest thing that I'm seeing is that, at least in my district, is that they were hiring, all of these positions in the central office, that were not even like instructional coaches, more of like supervisor type jobs, and, making, in the, well over the 6-figure numbers and stuff like that. And I said to myself, I was like, but how is this directly benefiting the students, and why is this being hired when they're not in classrooms, they're not directly servicing the students, and then you still have teachers and paraprofessionals getting severely underpaid? I mean, I say it all the time, it's like, teachers 1000% are underpaid, but like paraprofessionals, oh my
Honestly,
gosh.
Those folks are making like a pittance hourly wage.
Seriously. And it's not like they're just, sitting there doing nothing. It's like they're in the trenches with us. Or there's some, that are, they service like, some of our kids that have one-to-ones, in their IEPs. And I'm like, if they're not there, like I will call the office and I'll be like, listen, so-and-so's one-to-one is not here today. This is going to be a problem. Like someone either needs to be here or we need to figure something out, because this student cannot not have this. Or, yeah. So, I don't know. So that was my biggest discouragement, is like, the distribution of funds. It's like, why are we paying for, all of these positions that aren't directly benefiting the kids? And why aren't we putting more money into the, the people that are actually servicing the kids?
Absolutely. And it's funny because I do a lot of like advocacy work with different organizations here in Texas. I'm actually in the process of moving from San Antonio to New York City, because I can't teach in a state where they're going to tell me I have to be in the closet. So,
right.
Which is a thing that just happened. For those who don't pay attention to Texas politics, they passed the "Don't Say Gay" thing here. So
when did they do that?
In the early summer, it was the end of their sessions. They passed 8 anti-LGBTQ bills, but we killed 143 anti-LGBTQ bills. So the 8 they got through include a "Don't Say Gay in the Classroom" kind of thing. The wording is a little bit different than Florida, but it's still not good. And then they passed an anti-gender affirming care for all people. And so I have friends who are trans who are telling me that their doctors are already saying, like, I will give this to you as long as I can. And it's like their hormones and stuff, like the things that they take to be themselves, who have like fully transitioned, are clearly a man, and it's just like super frustrating.
See, and that just breaks my heart, because so we, to go on kind of a side tangent from that, so we got really lucky here. So Jim and I found this doctor's office when we went to get vaccinated for monkeypox back last fall. But we are going to a doctor now that is a complete, LGBTQ doctor's office. And yeah, and it's just, and the thing that really makes me happy whenever I go, I mean, obviously the whole thing makes me happy, because you go in, it's nice and vibrant, there's flags everywhere, and, everybody there is so nice and supportive. My doctor is this, beautiful trans woman who is just wonderful. And, but, seeing the kids there is what makes me the most happy, because I'm like, wow, they're in a space where they are getting the right care for what they're going through. And, there's other places that don't have it, and for me, it's 10 minutes from my house. So it's like, for all I know, it's like there could be, I would bet money, that there's parents taking their kids there. They're probably driving 2 hours, because they want to go like, somewhere like that. But it's just, I don't know. It makes me sad that, we're in the same country, yet we're in 2 different worlds,
Yeah. If you ask Texas believes it's its own country. It's kind of stupid down here. But I moved here from California. So it's like my perspective of Texas is different than people who've lived here forever. Like they have their own pledge. Like there's a Texas pledge that students say in the morning along with the Pledge of Allegiance.
So the kids do two pledges every morning?
One to Texas and one to the country.
Oh my God, the first one's bad enough.
Yeah, I agree with you. So, before the side rail on talking politics, I do a lot of advocacy work, right? And so one of the things that was really big after COVID was the use of these like so-called ESSER funds. ESSER is an acronym for like the emergency funds that were given to schools to help with learning gaps and whatnot. And what I saw was a lot of what you're talking about, where these ESSER funds were creating positions that didn't directly impact the students. Meanwhile, there were resources in there for additional arts teachers and additional paraprofessionals and additional, like, you could use it to justify additional hiring. And they didn't hire positions that directly worked with the students. Like, in the district that I was in, they had hired 2 people who were intervention specialists, and those folks basically just like created plans for kids. But then all the work happened with other folks who were there to help, get these grades up or like get these tests passed, because it really comes down to standardized testing, right? And they hired 2 specialists for like the whole school district. And I'm just like, there's these millions and millions of dollars in funds that's being offered by the federal government for you to bring more resources to students in your classroom. You hired 2 people for the whole district. Like, and that's the thing that is mind-boggling to me, is it's when you do have these resources, everybody says, and it is very well known that education is underfunded, but when the resources are made available, it seems like they're being misused.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And we have that same thing in our district. Like, they hired a math supervisor and a language arts supervisor who, frankly, I couldn't tell you what they do all day. It seems like they, one of my coworkers joked and said they have meetings to have meetings.
I mean, that seems right.
It's sad because, and I think also that another group of people that get a really bad reputation are the people who are instructional coaches, because I think sometimes they think that those people are the same, and they're not. And I think the other problem also is that you can get, like, because, instructional coaches, they're making like, an admin salary, and you have some of them who do amazing, go above and beyond. And then you have some that do the bare minimum. So that group gets a bad rep also. Like my first job, when I taught in Hartford, we had a math coach and a reading coach in our building. And the 2 of them were incredible. Like, they were not just hiding in their offices every day. It's like they were in every single lunch wave, getting to know all the kids, going into every single classroom and helping and saying stuff like, let me pull that small group for math and let me help them. And she was like, what are you doing this week? And she was like, ooh, let me make you an anchor chart. Let me make you a this. Let me do this for you. It was all just, let me help, because I don't actually have a class that I'm teaching and grading and planning and stuff like that. They're like, let me help as much as I can. And then you have other ones where I'm like, let's just say I had one where I had a student in Hartford. She was very, let's just say, outspoken. And one day, one of the coaches came in, and my student literally said, "Who's that? Does she work here?" So
this lady just came in off the street.
Exactly. And clearly that's not somebody who's making a presence around the school. If an 8th grader by the month of April is like, who is that?
Yeah, absolutely. Having been on that campus for a couple of years,
Exactly.
Yes, I agree. Like, the biggest frustration that I can see is the appropriation of funds. So I totally understand where you're coming from, especially when you're an arts teacher with all the extracurricular activity going on, and there's seemingly endless funds for other programs and not any help or funds for yours.
Totally.
Yep. So let's talk a little bit about what it was like for you going into the classroom. If you were to sit down with someone who is queer and they're going into their first year of teaching, like what advice would you give them about being authentic?
I mean, and granted, everybody is different in that regard, because you might have a teacher that's going into the classroom and they're not comfortable with, being out. And trust me, I completely get that. Everybody, as I always say, it's like everybody spreads their wings and flies at, different times. But I will say this is that regardless of whether it's your, sexual orientation or just your personality, is that if you're not being your authentic self in your classroom, your kids will know. And your kids are not going, because the other big part of that is building the rapport and the trust. And how are kids supposed to trust someone who's not, being themselves? And we also, from, at least in my experience, the first school that I ever taught in was, very urban, a lot of kids that came from, not a lot. And, one of the social workers, described it to me one day. She said, she's like, you're already going to have kids coming up here with a million barriers and, a million different trust issues for whatever reason. Because maybe like, a parent left out of nowhere or something, traumatic happened to them. So, and, there's also kids there where it's like, this is the place during the day. This is the only time they will eat. And this is the only time that they will feel like they're actually really 100% safe. So, if they're already coming in there with their guard up, and you're not being your true authentic self, I'm not saying it's going to lead to, complete issues if you don't come out right away. But at a certain point, kids know when you're not, being you, and I think that the other thing that it does also, not just even with like, our sexual orientation, but it's like we were talking about before with, TV shows we like, and other things like that. It's just, it humanizes us, it humanizes teachers, because then kids realize like, oh, wait, so they like the same kind of stuff that I do. So there's a little bit of a barrier, broken there. It could be anything, it could be TV shows, it could be movies, it could be sports teams, whatever those kids, recognize, it's good for them.
I'll be the first to admit that I got into Stranger Things because of my students. And then once I started watching it, I was like, oh, well, I'm addicted. And
right.
Like, now I'm just like waiting with anticipation for the next year. For the season to come
year.
out. Yeah.
Well, the year
now with the and the acting strike and the other one that goes. And it's funny because like I'm here for the unions. I really am. I was cast on Netflix Nailed It, like the baking TV show. And I went out to LA and I filmed half an episode, and then IATSE went on strike and they shut down the production. And so my episode never aired, but like while I was sitting in my hotel in Burbank, not being on the TV show, I was like, you know what? I am here for the union. Like, I believe that those people need to be paid more, and especially after being there, because I was there for like a 14-hour day as a contestant, which means that all those people who were working crew were there before and after me.
Right. Yeah. 100%. Yeah.
It's interesting, especially as cosplayer right now, right? Because San Diego Comic-Con is happening right now as we speak, and I'm from San Diego, and so there's a lot of like, how do we handle cosplay at Comic-Con with the strike happening?
Yeah, and so thankfully, like what's been really good for us is because, me and my cosplay friends, we have a con that we're all planning to go to in Boston in August. And, we started to think like, we were like, okay, like what's, we were all kind of on eggshells for a second. We're like, okay, what's actually going to be allowed? Like, should we still go? The trip is all non-refundable. But also we want to support, the unions. But a lot of new stuff has come out about, what's allowed for cosplayers. And there's a lot more, allowed for us than, what people realize. Like, they said something came out actually yesterday that said, like, going to a con is not considered like, crossing the picket line, like, doing cosplay online. The big thing that, like, I have a friend who also, I think he might live in San Diego. He lives in somewhere in California. He's a TikTok friend of mine, but it's like, but he's kind of no, not CJ. Oh, I love CJ.
I love CJ too.
He's another
CJ
one.
and I know each other from San Diego.
Oh, that's hilarious. No, I know who he is too, but I was talking about this other guy. And so he posted that he's kind of put the brakes on his for a little while, but that's because he has plans to hopefully one day join SAG.
Right.
Whereas with myself, that's not, that's not my point. Yeah, exactly. And other people said, it's like, we don't want you to stop doing, like, for example, my friend Sam's business. Like, they don't want people to stop doing, princess parties. They don't want them to stop, visiting children in hospitals. Like, they don't want people to stop their streaming services, they said, because that's just going to give them more, more power to fight with and stuff like that. And then they said, if anything, the cosplaying actually helps. I am going to continue as as planned. Where I've got a couple things, that I'm repeating, but my friends and I actually have something new that we're going to try at the con, which we're excited about.
Yeah. I don't know. I think I stand in solidarity mostly because for a while I was AGMA, which for people who don't know is the Operatic Union and Ballet Dancers, and then I was Equity.
Yep. Oh, I know.
Right? And so, like, because those are sister unions to SAG, like, I'm just like always
totally.
When the union strikes, I'm like, fine, done. I don't care that I'm sitting in this hotel in Burbank, not being on a TV show. Like, I will go home glad that I got to experience something.
Exactly.
So it's an interesting time that we're living in. But
yeah, exactly.
Back to the topic at hand, because I could geek out all day about, like, Marvel
oh, I know, me too.
and TV and whatnot. Before we, like, wrap up the episode, I have one final question for you and then the opportunity for you to ask me a question. So the final question I have for you is, when you're looking at schools, what can, like, teachers, parents, administrators do to help make them more inclusive for LGBTQ?
I think the biggest thing that they can do is, number one is, create some sort of club or space for those kids to go to. So number one, like, so if they have, like, we have a unity club, it's called, at my school, like we talked about, we both had Gay Straight Alliance, like something like that right off the bat is already going to make teachers and, students feel, way more comfortable, and the parents of the, kids with, LGBTQ, because sometimes we have parents that come in, very firm, and very assertive about, like, how their child identifies. And what's interesting is, some of my colleagues are just like, they're like very confused. They're like, wow, they're so intense. I was like, you don't know what happened in the past. Maybe they had teachers that were not very accepting and ones that weren't really, weren't using the right pronouns and weren't doing the right thing. I was like, so if they come off as intense, I understand that. And granted, I myself have said to some of my fellow teachers, because I feel like sometimes teachers would ask me, the non-LGBTQ ones, they would come to me with stuff like that. They'd be like, Jake, am I doing the right thing? Am I saying the right thing? I'm trying to be, whatever and stuff. And I've even said to them sometimes, I've been like, yes, you're doing everything. And I've had to whisper, like, that parent is a little too much, so and I get it to a certain extent, but at the same time, I always say, like, I have a brother who's nonverbal autistic, and so I always say, I was like, you can 1000% advocate for your kid, but you can do your advocating and still be a nice person. And there's unfortunately a lot of parents these days that completely cross that line and basically, treat their teachers like, a servant. But back to what they can do to create that, obviously having that space, obviously, like, having anything hung, saying, like, that everybody is welcome. All of that stuff helps, because those are little subtle things that we think, don't really matter as much. But when the kids do see those, it really does make, an impact, and I actually had a student once who in my email signature, they actually emailed me and said, it makes me really happy that I see your pronouns in your email signature because, I identify with, they, them pronouns, and some people don't understand it. So thank you for doing that. So I would say just little subtle things like that to really help everybody feel welcome, I think is the best that you can do. And then if something happens where something goes wrong, whether a kid is, being bullied or an issue arises, I think the biggest thing that everybody can do is listen. And especially when it's technically, it's a community that you might not, identify with, it's like, for example, like whenever something comes to, an issue, if somebody is, trans, I always listen as, best as I can, because it's like, I can't, I'm a cisgender male. I can't speak for how a trans person feels or what they've gone through. I had a woman once, we were in a Zoom PD together and it was just me. Then they sent us into breakout groups and it was just me and her, and she's a Black woman. And they literally just, talked all about like, people of color and how they're represented in the classroom and stuff. And they were like, so go into breakout rooms and discuss. And her and I are just sitting there on the Zoom for like a second looking at each other. And I just looked at her, I said, talk. Like what am I going to say? That's not my experiences. Those are yours. So let's hear it, So I think listening is really important as well.
Absolutely. I think, I always find those PDs to be a little bit frustrating because of the breakout aspect of it. They're like, here are a bunch of people you don't know. We're going to lay some stuff that's on you that's relatively heavy, and then now go talk about it with people that you don't.
Exactly. And that's another thing. Sorry, if I'm going to add one more thing. That's another thing that they need to change is stop leading these PDs that make us, where they talk to us like we're also 12. Knock it off. It's the worst. It's so condescending. Like, I don't want to do an icebreaker with all of my coworkers. We all know each other. Like, we're not 12. Stop it.
Absolutely. What I think is so interesting too is it's like, at bare minimum, you have to have a bachelor's degree, and most teachers have a master's. So it's like, let us be the experts and talk to us like we're experts, as opposed to like we're just fresh faced and we have no idea what's going on. When I started teaching, I had spent years doing like live entertainment production. And so when I started teaching, because I look younger than I am,
right.
People were like, oh, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. He doesn't know what he's doing. And I'm like, look, I've had 10, 15 years of corporate experience that like makes up for the fact that I haven't been in the classroom, or I didn't go through a teacher training program at a university. It's different, but like, it doesn't mean that I'm fresh and green and I don't know.
No. And any teacher will tell you, it's like, 90% of what they learned about being a teacher is when they actually did it. And they say, okay, maybe 10% of what I learned in college helped, but like nothing helped until I actually started teaching student teaching,
Yep. And it's funny because even student teaching doesn't prepare you to do it on your own. Like, you always have someone there that's helping you out, who's already built the rapport with the student, who's already built the structures there. But when you have to go do all of that by yourself, it's a whole other ball game.
Correct. Yeah. And especially if you're like student teaching with somebody who's, a very seasoned and veteran teacher, like they've got their stuff on lock and those kids don't step a toenail out of line. Like both, like I had to do two different, because we're pre-K to 12 certified. They had us do 8 weeks in one school and 8 weeks in another. And so I had, a K to 5 school where the guy had been at it 25 years and it was boom, boom, boom. And then I had another woman who was a choir director, and she had 5 different choirs. Like her elite choir was a class during the school day. She'd been at it for 33 years. I'll be honest. I'm like, I didn't do much, it's like I was there, and I did some time where I taught some things, but
yeah, it's almost like you're going in as a guest conductor as opposed to like having to do a lot of work, because respectfully, they have already done.
Correct. Oh, 100%. Yeah, exactly. And those schools also, they were both two very white, very rich school districts. So And then I got to my first job in the urban district and I was like, oh, okay.
Completely different.
Let's see.
Yeah.
Completely different. Yeah. It was good though. You know, it's like I always joked with my first job I had, I was like, well, I survived that. Now I can, do most things, because that was like getting thrown to the wind.
All right. So we're going to wrap things up, and this time you get to ask me a question or a couple of questions, depending on if it dovetails. So
Yeah.
what would you like to know?
Totally. Awesome. So I forget, how many kids do you have?
I have 4 kids. They range in age from 9 to 20. And so we adopted the 3 older kids. They are all siblings. We adopted them in 2013. And then the youngest was born in 2014, and we adopted her at birth. So it's been a wild ride.
Right. Yeah. So my question for that is because I always see, I am done teaching at the end of the day, and I just wanted to like completely disassociate, blah, blah, blah. And then I would be driving home, and a couple of times I'd say like, thank God I don't have my own kids because I am just fried. So I would say to you, it's like, that's what I would ask you. It's like, what is the, maybe like, what are some of the challenge, and what is like, maybe the biggest challenge, or just, and there also could be rewarding things too. Like maybe like, the positives and, challenges with being both a teacher and a parent,
So some of the things that I think are positives is that for a while I was teaching at the same school in the same school district as my kids. And so like one of the positives was like I had a lot of eyes on my children, right? Like even the students were watching out for my kids, which I love. And I think that's really fun and cool. I also got to see them a lot more when I was working in corporate entertainment. Like I would be gone for 8 to 17 hours of the day, and I wouldn't be able to see them. But because I'm a teacher, I have basically the same schedule as my kids, with the exception of if I'm in rehearsals for something. And I've been very good about scheduling my rehearsals since I'm teaching, and I get to make the schedule that I'm done at 6 and I'm home for dinner. And so it's been a lot better for me because I get to see my kids more and I get to interact with them more, and like their teachers know me, and even though I don't work in the district anymore, like all of those people are still connected to me. And so like I get a lot of positive feedback from them, and my kids have a lot of friends who are kids of teachers because we're all connected. And so those are some of the positive things. I think that what is really hard, especially as an elective teacher, is that you do have those days where like I work at high schools, the teenagers just really pissed me off. I have 3 teenagers at home, and I just got like, I wanted to disassociate. I wanted to just sit on my phone all night. And you can't do that. You have to be there for the kids. And so it's hard to have to push through that. But then there were some days where it's just like, I'm going to go home and I'm going to eat dinner and I'm going to go to bed. And you also have to be kind of like cognizant of what you need personally. Because if you can't take care of yourself, then you won't be able to take care of your own children, and then you won't be able to take care of your students. So it's got its ups and downs, and like I love being a parent. I wouldn't trade it for anything. I think that we didn't know what we were going to expect. We went from 0 kids to 3 kids, and those kids had schedules, right? Because they were 5, 6, and 9, so they were in school, and they had, they were pre-potty trained, all the things. But then we got this baby a year later when we adopted the baby, and it was like a whole other, like, this person cannot do anything without you. And now she's 9, and I'm like, go back a little bit. Like, why are you doing all this stuff on your own? What's happening?
Right, because it happened so... It happened so fast. Yeah.
Yeah, she's visiting family right now, and she sent me like a selfie the other day, and I was like, did you grow? Are you older? Like, who is this kid? You've only been gone a couple of weeks visiting family. So it's a wild ride. I wouldn't trade it. I think that if people are considering having kids, they should, absolutely. I think that it's worthwhile for heterosexual as well as queer couples to like find parenting classes, because they exist. And like if you go through the adoption process, you have to go through parenting classes, and I think that it's worthwhile because even if you end up pregnant accidentally as a heterosexual couple, like,
right.
you can get resources to kind of help ease the process on what it means to be a parent. And some of those things in the parenting classes are how I manage classroom management. Because
nice.
it's like being stern versus being mean, and like how do you set ground rules and boundaries and all this stuff, and being consistent, and these are all things that are like textbook classroom management.
Nice.
So yeah, good question.
Did any of your follow-up questions, did any of your theatrical interests trickle down to your kids, or not so much?
My sons both did technical theater for a little bit.
Okay.
So they did the technical side. My daughter was in marching band for a little bit, and I was in marching band as a kid. I was a marching band, choir band, like theater geek. I did all the things. And then my youngest is cheerleader and gymnast, so it's performative, but it's not the same kind of performance. She once played Chip in Beauty and the Beast Junior, but she has it in her head that she has stage fright, so she can't do it again. And I was like, you were 6. Like, you'll grow out of it. It'll be fine.
Exactly. Well, I know I have a daughter. Sorry, my friend has a daughter who's a gymnast, so I know that I know that that can be a very expensive and grueling schedule. So my hat goes off to you there. My friend Brianna, she literally got her admin degree so she could get like the $7,000 increase. She was like, I need it. I need it for gymnastics.
Yeah.
She literally said, she was like, I need that increase. She's like, gymnastics doesn't pay itself.
No, it's like,
she's like,
debt to get this in pay increase to pay for my kids' activities.
Exactly. Seriously. She said, she was like, if you have a daughter and she says, I want to do gymnastics, just like, no, you don't, honey. No, you don't. She was like, show like 10 videos of them falling and just scare her, was what she said.
It's funny because my daughter wanted to do gymnastics, and then we did cheer, and she loves cheer, and then now she's doing gymnastics again, and I was like, both of them are very expensive, so let's choose one and decide.
Right, not both, please.
Yeah. If you want to do cheer and gymnastics, then can you do gymnastics now and then like do cheer in middle school and high school? Like, there are options here.
Right. Hey, at least it's not dance. That's even worse.
That's true, though I'm a past life dancer, so I'd be all for it. And she's like, do you remember that one time I took ballet class? I was like, yeah, you were 4. Like, how do you remember that one time you took a ballet class?
I love it.
Yeah. All right. Well, it's been so great talking with you. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Too.
And thank you, everyone, for tuning in to this episode. Bye. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Teaching While Queer. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to subscribe wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Leave a review, and that would help out tremendously. You can also support the podcast by going to www.teachingwhilequeer.com and hit support the show. Thanks so much, and have a great day.